I never thought I'd be here, writing something like this. My name isn't important, but for the sake of this story, call me Rachel. I'm 41, a stay-at-home mom, and for nearly 20 years, I believed I was building a life with a man who truly loved me. Paul, my husband of almost 2 decades, is 48 and works in finance. We've raised 2 kids together, our 18-year-old son, Eric, and our 15-year-old daughter, Mary. They are the light of my life, my reason for every breath I take. And up until a week ago, I thought I was just living a quiet, ordinary life. Our marriage had grown stale over time. I blamed it on busy schedules, stress, aging, and everything people warn you about once the honeymoon phase ends. I stopped feeling attractive years ago, especially next to someone like Paul, who always kept himself polished and distant. But I accepted it, because marriage is about riding out the rough patches, right? Eric has been dating his high school sweetheart Amy since freshman year. She's been around so long she felt like part of our family. I've baked her birthday cakes, helped her with school projects, and even lent her my jewelry for prom. Watching Eric fall in love for the first time, with someone so sweet, so respectful, made my heart full. It gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd done something right in this world. That's what makes all of this hurt so much more. It started with something small. Last week, Paul was scrolling through his phone at the kitchen island while I chopped vegetables. He left the phone face up, and as he exited an app, I caught a glimpse of something on his screen. It was quick, just a flicker of a message thread from iMessage, but it made my stomach twist. It was a text from Amy. She wrote, "I miss eating your sausage." I froze. My hand clutched the knife so tightly that my knuckles went white. Surely I had read it wrong. There had to be some other explanation. Maybe it was a meme or an inside joke. Something harmless. But the look on Paul's face when he realized I'd seen something, it wasn't confusion, it was panic. I told myself I was being paranoid. I tried to forget it, bury it under chores and errands and school drop-offs. But that night, after he went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I crept downstairs and checked his computer, something I hadn't done in years. What I found opened a door I can never close again. There was a hidden folder on his desktop, cleverly named but not clever enough. Inside were dozens of files, BDSM porn, screenshots of explicit OnlyFans subscriptions, and worst of all, saved photos of Amy from her Instagram. She was fully clothed, but still. What grown man saves images of his son's girlfriend? It was like watching my world shatter in slow motion. In the following days, I checked his phone again during random moments, when he was in the shower, when he left it charging in the kitchen. More messages, more evidence. I wasn't going crazy. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being betrayed in the most unforgivable way possible. This wasn't just cheating. This was a complete violation of trust, of family, of everything I thought was sacred in our home. And it was with someone my son loves, someone I had treated like my own daughter. I sat on the edge of my bed that night, the glow of the screen burning into my eyes. Paul was snoring beside me, like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong, and in that moment something inside me broke. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the screen, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. Because once you see the truth, no matter how horrifying, you can't unsee it. And now? Now, I had to decide what to do with it. The night I found the folder of saved messages and Instagram screenshots, I told myself that was the worst it could get. Just the physical betrayal, just the act, just the porn addiction, the messages, the hidden photos. But I was wrong, because betrayal doesn't always show up with lipstick on a collar. Sometimes it comes wearing a smile and leaves you gutted by laughter that wasn't meant to include you. A few nights after that first discovery, Paul was dozing off on the couch, his phone loosely resting on his chest. I walked past him, heart thudding, and saw that familiar light blinking. iMessage was open again, not actively on the screen, but you know how iPhones keep apps running in the background when you swipe up? I didn't mean to look. Honestly, I didn't. But my hand moved before my brain could catch up. I picked up the phone, quickly swiped into the open app, and there it was. The conversation between my husband and Amy. It wasn't just flirty. It wasn't even just sexual. It was cruel. Line after line, message after message, I read how Paul ridiculed me, my looks, my weight, my clothes, my voice, the same voice that whispered, "I love you" to him for 2 decades, the same body that carried our children, the same woman who stayed up late packing lunches and running birthday parties and scraping together every ounce of self-worth to keep this family feeling whole, and yet, there he was. "Can you believe she tried to wear that dress last night?" He texted Amy. "Looked like a sausage trying to burst its casing." Amy responded with a string of laughing emojis, then wrote, "She probably thinks it's still in style. So old." I could barely breathe. My throat tightened and my hands went ice cold. The world around me narrowed to the screen. Just those words, their words. Every tap of their thumbs was like a slap across my face. They weren't just having an affair, they were bonding over my humiliation. And somehow, that hurt more than the sex ever could. They mocked everything about me, called me boring, predictable, dull, words that felt like they were being carved into my skin. Paul even said, "Being with her is like living in slow motion." Amy wrote back, "LOL, you need someone who can keep up with you, not slow you down." Not once did either of them stop to think about the woman they were tearing apart, about the family they were detonating, about my son, Eric, the boy who loved Amy, who called her his first love, who trusted her with his heart. They laughed about me, bonded over their mutual cruelty, and the worst part? I had welcomed this girl into our home, into our lives. I had trusted her with my child, with my family. I had hugged her goodnight, bought her Christmas presents, called her sweetheart, and this was how she repaid me. I remember putting the phone down, the screen going dark, leaving me face to face with our framed family photo across the room. All four of us, smiling on a beach trip last summer. Paul had his arm wrapped around me like we were still in love. Amy had taken that photo, and I sat there, trembling in the dim light, realizing it had all been a lie. Paul didn't just break our vows, he shattered my identity. He weaponized my insecurities, the ones I whispered to him late at night, the ones I thought were safe with the man I married, and he handed them to an 18-year-old girl like punchlines to a private joke. I wasn't a wife anymore. I wasn't even a person to him. I was a punchline. And in that moment, something inside me snapped, not with rage, not with violence, but with clarity. This man, this stranger, didn't deserve another minute of my silence. I wasn't going to let him rewrite my story, because I still had a voice. And for the first time in years, I was going to use it. After reading those messages, I thought I had hit rock bottom. I believed the worst was behind me. But grief and betrayal don't come in straight lines. They come in waves. And sometimes, the aftershock is even more devastating than the initial blow. That night, as I sat alone in the dark living room, trying to wrap my head around the depth of Paul's cruelty, another realization crept in. Quietly at first, then screaming in my ears. Amy had just turned 18, 5 months ago, the same time frame when Paul's behavior had changed. Suddenly, things that didn't make sense before began clicking into place. The nights he stayed up later than usual, the secretive way he handled his phone, the way he insisted on picking Eric up from school, just to talk man to man but would come home oddly energized, as if hiding a secret thrill, the increased business trips, the smirks, the distance. It hadn't started last week or even last month. He'd been building this, nurturing it, grooming her. The thought turned my stomach. Amy had been around our family for years. She and Eric started dating their freshman year of high school. She'd been over for dinners, birthdays, movie nights. She helped decorate the Christmas tree and sat beside me while we baked cookies. She called me Mrs. H and told me I made the best chocolate chip pancakes. And Paul? He was always friendly, too friendly maybe. I remember how he'd linger in the kitchen when she was there, how he offered to drive her home so Eric could stay back and study. How he used to say things like, "She's really mature for her age," like it was some twisted compliment. But I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it, because who in their right mind imagines their husband, the man you've been married to for nearly 20 years, eyeing your son's teenage girlfriend? Now I couldn't unsee it. It wasn't just infidelity. It was premeditated, calculated, predatory. I began looking back, sifting through my memories like a crime scene investigator. The thong I found in our bedroom a month ago, the one I convinced myself might have been Mary's, even though she doesn't wear thongs. The flirtatious tone in Amy's voice when she said goodbye to Paul. The nervous laughter when I caught them talking alone in the hallway. I ignored all of it. I chalked it up to paranoia. But deep down, I think my body knew. The tension in my shoulders, the headaches, the way I flinched when he touched me. I just didn't listen to my gut. I wanted to believe I was imagining things, because the truth was too horrific to consider. What kind of man waits for a teenager to turn 18 so he can justify crossing the line? What kind of husband watches his son fall in love just to prey on the girl who called their house her second home? The answer made me sick. Paul didn't just betray me. He violated the very fabric of what it means to be a father, a protector, a husband. He used the trust we all gave him as a weapon, and now I was left holding the pieces, trying to make sense of a story I never thought I'd be a character in. I hadn't confronted him yet, not because I was afraid of the fight, but because I knew this was bigger than a confrontation. This was about my children, my son, Eric, who still thought Amy hung the moon, my daughter, Mary, who had brought friends home under our roof, unaware of the man lurking behind the fatherly smile. How could I protect them from this? How could I shatter their world with the truth? And yet, how could I not? The man I married was gone, and the mask he'd worn for so long had finally cracked. All that remained was a stranger, a danger, and I knew the next step wasn't about mourning my marriage. It was about preparing for war. After the realization sank in that Paul had likely been grooming Amy long before she turned 18, something inside me shifted. The grief was still there, the horror, the disbelief. But buried beneath it all was a rising clarity. I couldn't undo what he'd done, but I could control what happened next. And I was going to make sure this man never had the chance to hurt anyone else again. So I played dumb. I smiled when I needed to. I didn't flinch when he kissed my cheek or asked what was for dinner. I nodded when he mumbled about late nights at the office and pretended to believe every word. Inside, I was burning, but outside, I was calm. Because if I wanted justice, for myself, for Eric, for Mary, I needed proof. I needed a plan. The first thing I did was call my brother. He's a former Marine, now a private investigator who doesn't believe in gray areas when it comes to right and wrong. I didn't go into detail on the phone. I just said, I need a lawyer. A tough one. And without missing a beat, he connected me with a woman named Linda, a bulldog in heels, the kind of attorney who doesn't flinch at ugly cases. That same night, while Paul was asleep in our bed, snoring like he hadn't destroyed our family, I slipped into his home office. I knew his password. He never thought I'd use it. Inside, it was worse than I expected. I found folders full of files, screenshots, saved images from Amy's Instagram, hundreds of photos, even ones of her in our backyard, our living room, our kitchen, all fully clothed, but it didn't matter. The collection had a voyeuristic chill to it, like she was being watched, cataloged. Worse still, there were browser histories, BDSM forums, OnlyFans subscriptions, sex chat rooms. He had a specific search pattern, girls between 18 and 22, always barely legal, always vulnerable looking. I transferred everything to an encrypted hard drive and took screenshots of every piece of evidence. I opened his iMessage app and started forwarding everything relevant to my secure email account. He had deleted most of the history, but I was able to pull the last few months from iCloud. It was enough, more than enough. The texts with Amy weren't just flirty, they were graphic. Conversations about meeting up, about sneaking around, about how boring I was, and how much hotter she made him feel. I printed everything, date-stamped, organized. The next day, I booked a separate consultation with Linda. We met at a quiet office suite outside the city, far from prying eyes. I laid out my stack of papers like I was building a case in front of a jury. She didn't blink once. "This is more than just infidelity," she said, scanning the documents. "This is grooming, this is predatory behavior, and this is enough to burn him to the ground." I told her everything, about Eric, about Amy, about the thong I found, about the night I caught a glimpse of that vile text thread. She listened, truly listened, and by the end of it, she looked at me not with pity, but with fierce determination. We're going to protect your kids, we're going to protect you, and we're going to make sure he answers for all of this. I walked out of that office with a restraining order in the works, a plan for temporary custody, and a growing folder of evidence. Back at home, I kept playing my part. I was the dutiful wife, smiling, nodding, surviving. But every time Paul left his phone unlocked or walked away from his computer, I was there, collecting more. Every careless mistake he made became another weapon in my arsenal. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a mother protecting her children, a woman reclaiming her life. And when the time came to confront him, I wasn't going to beg for answers or scream for apologies. I was going to come armed, with the truth, with the law, and with the full force of a woman who had been silent for far too long. The moment I scheduled the Zoom call with Paul, my stomach churned with dread. He was out of town on one of his finance retreats, and I knew I couldn't wait another day to confront him. Not with what I knew, not with what I had. I had the screenshots, the printouts, the saved messages, and all the evidence I needed. But no amount of preparation could truly steady the heart when it's about to break all over again. When I clicked Join Meeting, I could hear my pulse in my ears. His face popped up on screen within seconds. His hair was disheveled, his shirt collar askew, and he looked unsettled. Not guilty, not sorry, just angry, like someone caught in the act, not ashamed of what they did, but furious they got found out. He didn't even say hello. "Maya," he said, his voice tight. "What is this about?" I took a breath and tried to keep my voice even. "Paul, we need to talk. I know what's been going on between you and Amy." His eyes narrowed. "You don't know anything." "I saw the messages," I said, holding up a printed page to the camera. "The photos, the conversations, I have it all." He shifted in his seat. His hand shot up to rub his forehead, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for a script that no longer existed. "You're taking things out of context," he snapped. "This isn't what you think." "Don't," I said, the anger bubbling in my throat. "Don't insult me by pretending this is something other than what it is." The next few moments were a blur of raised voices. He grew redder by the second, his voice climbing into a near shout. "You have no right to go through my things. You're paranoid, controlling." But I didn't back down. "You groomed our son's girlfriend. You mocked me to her. You cheated. And now you want to act like I'm the one who's destroying this family?" His fist slammed onto the desk. The camera jolted. "You're trying to take my kids away from me," he roared. That line chilled me, because it wasn't just a defensive husband talking. It was a man unraveling, a man losing control. His eyes were wild, his face flushed, and sweat glistened on his brow. I could hear his heavy breathing through the speakers. "I'm filing for custody of Mary," I said, voice trembling but firm. "I've already spoken to my lawyer. There's a restraining order in progress." "You can't do this," he barked. "You don't get to erase me." "You did that yourself," I replied quietly, "when you betrayed all of us." His rage was blinding now. He repeated the word context like it was a shield he could hide behind. "You don't understand," he growled. "None of that means what you think it means." "I don't need to interpret anything," I said, standing my ground. "I have the receipts." He leaned in close to the camera. His eyes bored into mine. "You'll regret this." And that was the final straw. "I'm ending this call," I said. "Don't contact me. All communication goes through my attorney." "You can't just—" But I clicked end meeting before he could finish. The screen went black. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing, but for the first time, I felt the cold edge of power in my voice. I had faced him. I had looked into the eyes of a man I once loved and saw nothing but a stranger. I picked up the phone and called Linda. "He's dangerous," I told her. "I need the restraining order filed, now." I wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. I was fighting for protection, for survival, for the safety of my children. Paul was no longer a husband. He was a threat, and I was no longer a victim. The car ride to my brother's house was quiet. Too quiet for a vehicle carrying two teenagers. Eric sat in the front seat, earbuds in, staring out the window as miles of bare winter trees passed by. Mary sat in the back, legs pulled up to her chest, chewing her thumbnail, The weight in the air wasn't from what they knew, but from what they didn't. They sensed something was wrong. I could feel it. When I pulled into my brother's driveway, the late afternoon sun was already melting behind the trees. I turned off the ignition and sat there for a moment, my hands still on the wheel, trying to steady my breath. This was the moment I'd been dreading more than anything else, telling them, shattering what innocence they still had left, ripping the veil away from the family we once were. My brother came out to greet us, his expression soft but serious. He knew what was coming. He'd already prepared the spare bedroom for us. When we stepped inside, it felt warm, safe, temporarily removed from the chaos of everything Paul had destroyed, but safety wouldn't protect them from the truth. We gathered in the living room. My brother gave us space, quietly closing the door behind him. I sat across from my children, my hands trembling in my lap. "I need to talk to you both," I began, my voice already cracking. "About something serious." Eric removed his earbuds. Mary sat upright. "What is it?" she asked. Her eyes searched my face, waiting. I looked at them, really looked, and for a split second I wished I could run. I wished I could protect them from this like I'd always tried to do. But I couldn't anymore. I took a deep breath. "It's about your dad." Both their faces shifted, slightly, cautiously. They knew something was coming, but not this. I swallowed hard. "He's been seeing someone much younger, someone close to our family." Eric blinked. "What do you mean?" I didn't dance around it. I couldn't afford to. "It's Amy." The silence that followed nearly crushed me. Eric's expression crumbled in slow motion. He stared at me as if he didn't understand the language I was speaking. "What?" he whispered. Tears filled my eyes. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I found messages between them, photos, conversations. This has been going on." "No," Eric said sharply, standing up. That's not." She wouldn't do that. Not with him. Mary's face twisted into something between disbelief and fury. "Are you saying he's been with Eric's girlfriend?" "I'm sorry," I said again, choking back sobs. "I didn't want this. I didn't ask for this. But I had to tell you. You deserve the truth." Eric backed away slowly, like he'd just walked into a room filled with fire. Mary stood up next, hands clenched into fists. I knew something was off about the way he looked at my friends. I knew it. I reached out, but Eric recoiled, not in anger, but in shock. His face was pale, his eyes glossy. "I need air," he muttered, and before I could stop him, he walked out the front door. Mary didn't cry, not yet. Her face was stone cold. "I hate him," she whispered. "I hate her." And then finally the tears came. Hair in mine. The dam broke. I held her as tightly as I could, her sobs shaking both our bodies. Outside, the sun disappeared. Inside, everything I'd tried to protect shattered. But even in that wreckage, I knew this was the first step toward healing. Telling them was the hardest thing I've ever done, but lies had already burned down our home. I refused to let silence finish the job. We were broken now, but broken together, and somehow, in that truth, there was still a seed of hope. The day after I told my kids the truth, the world felt like it had slowed to a crawl. My brother's house was quiet, too quiet. Mary stayed curled in bed most of the morning, her headphones in, face turned to the wall. Eric hadn't said a word to me since the night before. He'd gone on a long walk and returned just before midnight, eyes bloodshot, lips pressed in a tight line. When I asked if he was okay, he nodded, but I could tell he wasn't. Neither was I. I couldn't stop thinking about Amy, not the betrayal. God knows that part still gutted me. But what role Paul had truly played in her life. I remembered how close she used to sit next to me at the dinner table, helping me wash dishes, calling me Mom Number 2. Now I wondered if every moment of that closeness had been manipulated. If the man I married had been planting seeds the whole time, while I was too busy trying to keep our family upright. I needed answers, so I called Amy's mom. We'd never been particularly close. PTA meetings, a few school fundraisers, polite small talk over cupcakes and lemonade. But now we were two women caught in the same nightmare, connected by the man who had poisoned both our families. She agreed to meet at a local coffee shop near the edge of town. It was quiet, with large windows and worn leather chairs. I arrived early, nerves tangling in my chest. She walked in 10 minutes later, face pale, eyes red from what looked like hours of crying. We didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I don't know what to say," she began, her voice cracking. I I didn't want to believe it. I nodded slowly. Neither did I. She pulled her phone from her purse and placed it on the table. I confiscated her phone after everything came out, went through everything I could. Most of the messages were gone, deleted, but I found some, and the cloud backed up more. I hesitated, then reached for the phone. My hand shook as I scrolled. Words popped up on the screen. Texts between Paul and Amy. My stomach turned. Flirtatious, explicit, degrading. I told her she wasn't allowed to see him anymore. Her mother continued, voice rising. She screamed at me, said I didn't understand, that they were in love. She shook her head, tears brimming again. She told me I was just jealous that someone finally treated her like she mattered. It hit me like a blow to the chest. Amy thought Paul loved her. She believed this fantasy because Paul, my husband, had built it brick by brick. He targeted a girl who came from a broken home, who was already vulnerable, already desperate to feel seen, and he filled that void. "She won't go to therapy," Amy's mom whispered. "She's convinced we're trying to tear them apart for no reason. She says Paul is the only one who understands her, that they have plans." Her voice trembled. She said she'll run away if I try to stop her. I felt sick. "He's a predator," I said, barely able to get the words out. "And she doesn't even see it." We sat there in silence for a long time, the weight of it all pressing down on us. "She's still a child," I whispered, "and he's a monster." Amy's mom nodded, gripping her coffee cup so tightly her knuckles turned white. "I just want my daughter back." We didn't hug when we left. We didn't cry together. We were both too numb for that. But as I walked out into the biting cold, one thing had become terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about manipulation, grooming, control. And Amy, whether she realized it or not, was just as much a victim as the rest of us. I got in my car, started the engine, and sat there for a long time before pulling away. I didn't know what the next step was, but I knew I had to take it. The night before I confronted Paul, I barely slept. I sat awake in my brother's guest room, the quiet hum of the baseboard heater the only sound breaking the stillness. My laptop glowed faintly on the desk, open to my lawyer's email, outlining my rights and what steps I could take once I confronted him. But none of the legal language could prepare me for the emotional weight of what I was about to do. I wasn't just calling to accuse a man of cheating. I was about to look into the face of someone I had built my life with, someone I thought I knew, and ask him why he destroyed everything. At 10 a.m. sharp, I clicked Join Meeting. The screen loaded, and then there he was. Paul, unshaven, hair disheveled, eyes darting like a cornered animal. He looked nothing like the calm, polished man I had known for 20 years. He looked scared, sweaty, on edge. His voice was clipped before I could even say hello. "Maya, whatever this is, it's not what you think." He leaned toward the screen, eyes wild. "Context," he blurted out. "You're missing the context." I blinked. "Paul, I've seen the messages." He flinched, visibly. His hand gripped something off-screen, papers maybe. His other hand raked through his hair again and again, a nervous tic I hadn't seen in years. Those were jokes. You don't understand what she meant, what I meant." I took a deep breath, my voice calm but icy. "You told an 18-year-old girl you loved her. You let her believe this was real. You let her believe you were leaving me for her. And you laughed about me with her like I was some irrelevant houseplant." He slammed his fist on the desk. The camera shook. "Don't twist this, Maya. You're just trying to take my kids away from me," he shouted, spit flying from the corner of his mouth. "You have no right." "No right?" I snapped, my calm cracking. You slept with our son's girlfriend. You ridiculed me to a child you groomed. And now you're screaming at me over Zoom like some deranged lunatic. You don't get to talk about rights." His face turned beet red. "You think you're going to win? That you're going to paint me as some predator? I'll fight this. I'll fight you." "I'm not afraid of you anymore," I said, staring directly into the lens. "And I'm not alone." He froze. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Fear, not of me, but of what might come next. The evidence, the lawyers, the consequences. And then he exploded again. "You're making a mistake. You think you're smart, but you've always been boring, predictable. You don't even understand what you've started." My voice dropped. "I understand perfectly, Paul, and that's why this call is over." "You can't hang up on me," he shouted. "You can't just—" But I already had. The screen went black. The silence that followed was deafening, and I realized I had been shaking. My hands, my breath, everything. He wasn't just guilty, he was unhinged, and that scared me more than anything. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. "I need a restraining order," I said without hesitation. "He's not just dangerous emotionally. I'm starting to think he might be dangerous physically." It was no longer about betrayal, it was about protection. For me, for Eric, for Mary. I'd spent 20 years standing beside a man who had slowly eroded my confidence, my peace, and my identity. But that morning, on a Zoom call in a quiet guest room, I saw him for what he really was, and I knew then I was never going back. The day after the Zoom call with Paul, my lawyer filed an emergency petition for a temporary restraining order and sole custody of Mary. It moved faster than I expected, faster than my emotions could catch up. By evening, I had legal documents in my hands declaring that Paul could not contact me or come near the kids until further notice. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was exhaustion, the kind that settles in your bones, the kind that doesn't lift with coffee or fresh air, the kind that comes after months, no years, of pretending everything was fine. Paul called my phone 17 times the next day. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Legally, I couldn't, and emotionally, I wouldn't. My lawyer advised me to document everything, so I did. Every call, every email, every attempt he made to break through the silence I was finally allowed to have. But what caught me off guard wasn't Paul. It was Amy. She started showing up at our old house, pounding on the front door even though no one was there anymore. She left notes in the mailbox. "He loves me," one said. Another, "You're trying to ruin us." It was unsettling. Amy had once been the quiet, respectful girl I used to bake cookies with. Now she was showing signs of obsession, of delusion. She wasn't just defending Paul. She was fighting for him, as if they were Romeo and Juliet, and I was the evil stepmother standing in the way of their great love. Her mother called me in tears one night. "She's out of control," she whispered. "I found her sneaking out again last night. I don't even know where she goes anymore." We both knew she was going to him. Despite everything, Paul was still pulling her strings, and Amy, only 18, was still too deep in his web to see the damage he'd done to her, to my son, to our family. Amy's mother had confiscated her phone once already, and we managed to recover chat logs, messages that mirrored the same disturbing language I had seen on Paul's device. Flirty, sexual, possessive. Even after the fallout, they had continued. Whispering lies, swapping dreams of running away together. It was like she thought she was in a movie. But this wasn't a movie. This was real. And no matter how twisted it felt, I couldn't hate Amy. I wanted to, but I couldn't, because I saw it clearly now. Paul had groomed her, slowly, methodically. He'd made her feel seen in ways she'd never been seen before. Not by her broken family, not by her peers, and certainly not by any healthy adult. He'd fed her a fantasy, and now, even when the truth was right in front of her, she was clinging to it like a lifeline. Meanwhile, my kids were trying to put their own pieces back together. Eric barely spoke, but he agreed to see a therapist next week. Mary, on the other hand, was furious, not just at Paul, but at herself, for not noticing, for letting Amy get so close. She told me quietly one night, Mom, I keep wondering if he ever looked at my friends the way he looked at Amy. Her voice trembled, and that broke me. Because once trust is shattered like this, everything becomes a question. Every smile, every hug, every moment that once felt safe is now under a microscope. That's what Paul took from us. Not just peace, but security. I sat her down and promised her, we're safe now, and we're never going back. But even as I said it, I knew the road ahead would be long. And Paul? He hadn't even begun to feel the consequences. Not yet. The morning of the court filing, I sat at my brother's kitchen table, documents spread out around me like the shattered remains of my old life. Legal forms, screenshot evidence, bank statements, chat transcripts, all laid out in manila folders, each one labeled, color-coded, and meticulously organized by my lawyer's paralegal team. It was surreal to see 20 years of marriage boiled down to pages of betrayal and numbers. "You okay?" my brother asked quietly, pouring me a cup of black coffee. I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. Truthfully, I hadn't slept more than 4 hours in days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Paul's face from that Zoom call. Red, sweaty, furious, unrecognizable. He had become someone I didn't know, or maybe I had never really known him at all. The court date was still weeks away, but my lawyer wanted us prepared for every possibility. "He's cornered," she said, flipping through the file marked Paul, evidence. And men like that? When they lose control, they get reckless. She wasn't wrong. Paul had gone silent for 2 days after the Zoom call, but then the silence cracked. First, it was a series of voicemails. Long, rambling, incoherent. 1 minute, he was pleading for a second chance. The next, he was threatening to fight for custody. His voice would crack with desperation, then rise into a growl of rage. Every message left a knot in my stomach. Then came the letters. Handwritten, dropped at my brother's mailbox. The first was an apology, half-hearted, blaming stress and loneliness for his actions. The second was worse, a 3-page manifesto about how he and Amy were soulmates, and I had always stood in the way of his happiness. He even included printed-out photos of the two of them at a school event from years ago, circled in red ink like proof of their destiny. It was unhinged, and it terrified me. Amy, meanwhile, was becoming more and more erratic. Her mother called in tears one night, telling me that Amy had snuck out again, this time leaving a note. "I'm not coming back. He loves me. We belong together." She was 18, legally an adult. There was nothing her mother could do to stop her. But Paul? He was avoiding her. That was the twist none of us expected. After all the obsession, all the secrecy, all the plans, they weren't together. He was dodging her texts, ignoring her calls, and had even changed his phone number. It was classic. He got what he wanted. And now, when things got hard, he disappeared. Amy's mother begged me to help. "She still thinks he's going to come back. She thinks you're keeping him from her. Maya, she hates you." I didn't blame her, not really. I hated me too, for not seeing it sooner, for not protecting my son, for letting Amy into our lives so deeply that her betrayal felt personal. But I also knew this wasn't about me, not anymore. This was about a man with a sickness, a man who preyed on youth and loyalty, a man who never imagined he'd lose the woman who had carried his family for 2 decades, until she stood up and said, "No more." So I documented every letter, saved every voicemail, passed it all to my lawyer. We were building a case. And it wasn't just about divorce anymore. It was about safety, protection, justice. The final straw came when Paul showed up, unannounced, pounding on the door of my brother's house in the middle of the night. My brother called the police. Paul fled before they arrived. But that was it. That was enough. The judge granted a permanent restraining order the next day. Paul was banned from contacting me or the kids. Any violation would result in jail time. The court date was set, and I would be ready, not just with evidence, but with truth, because I wasn't scared of him anymore. I was done being quiet. And now it was time to speak, loud, clear, and in front of the world. The courthouse was colder than I expected, not just in temperature, but in the way everything echoed. Footsteps, shuffling papers, the squeak of leather shoes across polished floors. It all sounded like thunder in my ears. My hands were shaking as I clutched my folder of evidence, pages that told the story of my heartbreak, printed in black and white, itemized like receipts from a nightmare. Paul was already there when I arrived. He stood across the hallway in a pressed gray suit, looking put together, as if trying to recast himself as the devoted father and betrayed husband. His eyes met mine for just a second. Cold, empty, no recognition, no guilt, just calculation. He didn't smile, neither did I. I walked into that courtroom flanked by my lawyer and my brother. Mary and Eric weren't there, not for this part. I'd made that decision. They had already lost enough. Today, I would carry the weight for all of us. The judge was a woman, stoic, deliberate. Her gaze didn't waver once as she glanced through our case files. When she looked at me, I saw no pity, just something sterner, respect maybe. My lawyer began with a quiet confidence that steadied me more than I expected. She presented the screenshots, the voicemails, the call logs. She described Paul's relationship with Amy, not as a love story, but for what it really was: manipulation, exploitation, and betrayal. When the photos from the chat logs appeared on the screen in court, my hands tightened around the arms of the chair. Then it was my turn to speak. I took the stand, swore to tell the truth, and sat down on a chair that suddenly felt too big for my body. My voice trembled at first. I gave 20 years of my life to that man, I began. I believed I was building a home, a family, a future. I looked toward Paul. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He betrayed me. He betrayed our children. And worst of all, he betrayed a young girl who trusted him. I told them everything. The moment I saw the message, the photos saved to his computer, the laughter he shared with Amy at my expense. I recounted it all, not to gain sympathy, but to tell the truth. There are some kinds of betrayal you never fully recover from, I said, but that doesn't mean you stay silent. There was a moment during my testimony when I looked up at the judge and saw her eyes soften. Just a flicker, but it was enough. Then Paul's lawyer tried to cross-examine me. He tried to twist the story, paint me as unstable, vengeful. "Mrs. Taylor, wouldn't you say you're reacting emotionally, not rationally?" he asked. I sat up straighter. My voice was clear now. Yes, I'm emotional, because I'm a human being who was lied to, manipulated, and discarded by the man I trusted most. That doesn't make me irrational. That makes me honest. I heard a few gasps in the courtroom. Someone cleared their throat. The judge raised an eyebrow at Paul's lawyer. He backed off. When it was over, I stepped down from the stand, legs numb but heart steady. Paul wouldn't even look at me. That was fine. He'd spent years not seeing me anyway. As we walked out of the courtroom, my lawyer whispered, "You did exactly what you needed to do." And for the first time in months, I believed her. I didn't just speak for myself. I spoke for Mary, for Eric, for every woman who's been told to stay quiet, smile, and endure. Not today. Today, I used my voice, and I didn't whisper. It's strange how healing begins, not with fireworks or dramatic gestures, but with stillness, with silence, with small moments that finally feel safe. 2 months have passed since the court hearing. The temporary custody was upheld. Paul was ordered to stay away, to undergo psychiatric evaluations, and to pay support. There's still a long road ahead. Legal paperwork, divorce proceedings, a custody hearing that will finalize everything. But for now, we're free. The three of us, me, Eric, and Mary, moved into a rental home across town. It's not big, but it's bright. There's a little backyard where Mary planted herbs and a kitchen that smells like vanilla every Sunday morning when Eric makes pancakes. It's not perfect, but it's ours. There are still days when the grief hits like a wave, when I catch my reflection in the hallway mirror and feel the ghost of the woman I used to be, exhausted, small, invisible. But then I hear Mary laughing in the next room, or Eric asking how I'm doing with that same steady tone he used to never speak with before, and I remember, we're not broken anymore. We're becoming whole. Mary finally agreed to see a therapist. She's still angry, but that anger has direction now. She's channeling it into activism, reading about emotional manipulation, and even journaling. Her eyes don't look as heavy as they did before. Eric, my sweet, strong Eric, is healing too. Slowly, quietly. The other day, he told me he didn't want to remember Amy for how things ended. She's confused, he said, but I know who I am now, and that's enough. He's not bitter, not vengeful, just wiser. Sometimes I wonder where Paul is, if he's still trying to spin stories, if he's still convincing himself he's the victim. But then I stop, because that man no longer holds power over this house, these hearts, this life. He took so much from us: time, trust, innocence, but he didn't destroy us. He only made room for something new. The woman I am now doesn't beg to be seen. I don't shapeshift to meet anyone else's expectations. I wear what I want. I speak when I want. And when I look in the mirror, I no longer ask, why wasn't I enough? Because I am. I know now that love is not supposed to feel like walking on eggshells, that marriage should not feel like endurance, that silence isn't always strength, and speaking up isn't betrayal, it's bravery. And to anyone reading this who has ever been made to feel small, who's been erased by the people they gave everything to, please hear me when I say, you are not the problem. You are not crazy. And you do not owe your peace to people who profit from your pain. There is life after betrayal. There is love after abandonment. And most importantly, there is you. One morning, I found a letter from Mary taped to my bathroom mirror. In her crooked handwriting, it read, "Mom, I see you now. I'm proud of you. Thank you for saving us." I sat on the floor and cried, not because I was sad, but because those words were the closure I didn't know I needed. This is the life I choose now, one where I am no longer surviving someone else's story, but writing my own. And this time, I'm not writing it for approval. I'm writing it for peace.